This from the White House fact sheet released. President Donald Trump takes action to end crime and disorder on America's streets. So it says, ending vagrancy and restoring order. The order directs the Attorney General to reverse judicial precedents and end consent decrees that limit state and local government's ability to commit individuals on the streets who are at risk to themselves or others. This is really important. I know it's something nobody wants to talk about, but this idea that, look, these people pose a danger to themselves and others. How can you say that someone dying out in the open on the streets with a needle in their arm doesn't pose a danger to themselves? So we have to start talking seriously about this idea of involuntary commitment. There's even many Democrats who want to go that direction. It's time. It says this order redirects funding to ensure that individuals camping on streets and causing public disorder and that are suffering from serious mental illness or addiction are moved into treatment centers, assisted outpatient treatment, or other facilities. So really focusing on treatment first. Not housing first, treatment first. The statement from the White House goes on to state really what we all know to be true. Federal and state governments have spent tens of billions of dollars on failed programs that address homelessness, but not its root causes, leaving other citizens vulnerable to public safety threats. And we talked about Portland, $700 million this year they'll spend on homelessness, only for the crisis to get 20% worse. And much of that money comes from the federal government. The White House says shifting these individuals into long-term institutional settings for humane treatment is the most proven way to restore public order. So as we said, so we were waiting for this news to break when we were wrapping up Thursday's show because we knew it was coming. We'd been given a heads up on it. The federal government can only do so much, right? So hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars every year that go into this housing first approach and harm reduction efforts comes from you, comes from local taxpayers who are paying additional city taxes, county taxes, state taxes to be funneled into things that aren't working. I mean, what did former Governor Jay Inslee say? He said housing was the fundamental underlying cause of our homeless crisis, which just is not true. It's not true. I'm not even going to debate it with anyone. It's a drug crisis and a mental illness crisis. And throwing a drug-addicted person or a mentally ill person into an apartment or an affordable house or even a tiny home is not going to fix the reason why they were quote-unquote homeless to begin with. So it's just an absolute utter lie manufactured to get more of your money. So the bulk of it comes from local taxpayers, and less of it in states like Washington, Oregon, and California come from the federal government. But there is still a big chunk that the Trump administration can try to withhold if it's being directed to housing first. Just as one example, the failed King County Regional Homelessness Authority, which again has been in place for several years. It was supposed to be the end-all be-all fix to homelessness. And what has happened? Homelessness has gotten worse, despite the fact that the King County Regional Housing Authority has spent more than $1 billion so far. So for 2026, HUD, the Department of Housing Urban Development, has $25 million that is supposed to, in this proposed budget, go to the continuum of care for the King County Regional Homelessness Authority to deal with unhoused individuals. Now, when I look at the breakdown of some of that money, some of it's for rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, administrative and operations, youth programs, transitional housing. So I would think that HUD would probably maintain funding that is directed at treatment. But if it's anything directed at housing first, or propping up harm reduction, which is the idea that we should spend millions in taxpayer funds handing out kits to make it easier for people to ingest the drugs or take the drugs that are ultimately killing them, that is money that, no question, the federal government is going to look to withhold from cities like Seattle, counties like King, and states like Washington. And $25 million, when you're talking about a proposed 2026 budget of $199 million, $25 million is substantial. So is that enough to get them to veer away from housing first? Because everyone in any significant position of power in Washington state, be it the former governor, the current governor, Democratic leadership in Olympia, the mayor of Seattle, the head of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, they have all said that homelessness is being driven by housing. And they have all wanted to focus on housing first. And they have all been supportive of quote unquote harm reduction, which is just assisted suicide. So are they willing to say, well, we can't lose these funds, so let's turn away from it. Very similar situation we are now in to the executive order that Trump put down around ending gender mutilation of children. You know, it was this question of, you have this practice that's clearly wrong, right? And you have these progressives and Democrats who won't back away from it on the merits because the science isn't there, because it's wrong. But now you're seeing them start to back away from it because they don't want hospitals, et cetera, don't want to lose federal funding. So it's kind of sad that this point that we're in right here, where they won't back away from housing first and harm reduction because it's proven to fail many, many, many times over 15 years. That alone should be enough. You shouldn't have to have a threat of withholding money from the federal government that convinces you that housing first is a failure. We can see it with our own eyes every single day. And we can feel it with our pocketbooks that are lighter than they've ever been because we have paid so much of our hard-earned money toward a housing first model that has failed. We've squandered billions of dollars over 15 years, tens, hundreds of billions of dollars if you look at the entirety of the West Coast, on a housing first model that has landed even more people in homelessness than ever before. So if you had people who really cared about helping individuals on the streets, we would have backed away from housing first a long time ago. We would have backed away from harm reduction a long time ago. So they clearly don't care about doing stuff that works. They care about fueling the homeless industrial complex. They can keep millions of dollars of your money going out the door to their friends and allies in nonprofits that do this kind of work without showing any results. So is $25 million to the King County Regional Homelessness Authority enough to put pressure on them, to make them make that decision, not for the right reasons, but for the sake of finances? I don't know. Here's what I do know, and this was so predictable. This is one of my fears with all of these executive orders from President Trump. Now, don't get me wrong, they have to be done. We have to do this. But I knew the second it happened how it would be spun, because we see it spun this way on a variety of other issues. For instance, we talked about Governor Bob Ferguson trotting around the state talking about how our budget situation is going to be disastrous because of the one big beautiful bill. When in reality, our budget situation is disastrous because of Democrats here who can't stop spending money. But what did the one big beautiful bill and cuts to Medicaid and Planned Parenthood do for Governor Bob Ferguson? It gave him a nice little scapegoat where he could manipulate the minds of his TDS voters and say, oh, don't blame the budget crisis on me. Don't blame it on Democrats who have been in power for 40 years. Let's blame it on Donald Trump. So what do you think is going to happen here? Well, now this massive homeless crisis that has been created because of progressive leadership that existed long before Donald Trump even ran for president the first time, and that has clearly been getting worse over the last 15 years, all because of things Democrats have done. What will they blame it on now? Well, now they'll blame it on Donald Trump. It'll just keep getting worse as it has, right? Because they made it so and they don't want to make it better. But now they have a scapegoat where they can go, and they can go to the news media, which will just pick up their narrative. They can go to their voters and they can say, whenever they're confronted now with questions about homelessness and how bad it's gotten and why hasn't any progress been made, now they have a scapegoat that the vote blue, no matter who crowd will just eat up without asking any questions. It's Donald Trump's fault. And we already see that. The office of the mayor releasing a statement from Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell, basically talking about, oh, we've been doing a good job. We don't need the Trump administration to intervene. President Trump issued a bombastic executive order that is not focused on prevention or meaningful solutions. Instead, it drives a false narrative to distract from failed campaign promises like bringing down prices and effectively addressing global instability. If Trump were actually interested in helping cities, he'd stop cutting the social safety net, maintain investments in HUD and housing vouchers, and challenge Washington, D.C.'s status quo by funding affordable housing development and treatment options at scale. So here you have a mayor who has utterly failed on homelessness, not only as mayor, but as a longtime member of the Seattle City Council before he was mayor. He is to blame, in large part, for how bad homelessness has gotten, but now he sees a scapegoat. that voters in a city like Seattle will buy. And now he's blaming Trump. Now it's Trump's fault for not having meaningful solutions to homelessness. It's Trump's fault for not funding treatment options at scale, despite the fact that the city of Seattle has had billions of dollars addressed to this and they haven't been able to fix it. But now it's Donald Trump. Who else do you think is going to very quickly blame Donald Trump? Oh, of course, Governor Bob Ferguson, Mr. TDS himself. This is another misguided and harmful executive order from the Trump administration. I'll be working with my team as we start hearing from federal agencies about how they plan to implement this executive order to determine our response. Washington will be focused on evidence-based approaches, not playing politics with people's lives. You son of a bitch. I swear to God, you have been killing people. People are dying today. They have been dying for 15 years on the fucking streets, and you might as well just walk over them. And now you see a political moment where you can blame Donald Trump for something you have contributed to. You don't care about these people. Playing politics with people's lives, that's what you're good at. That's what you have done. It's what you did as Attorney General. It's what you're doing as governor. You don't care at all about the people who are dying on the streets. And to talk about evidence-based approaches, where are they? Where are they? You want Donald Trump to focus on evidence-based approaches. Do you have evidence-based approaches? Are you hiding them? Are you keeping them for a rainy day? How bad does the homeless crisis have to get before you trot out these evidence-based approaches? The only approaches you have made it worse, have led to more people living in filth and squalor and disease and dying with needles in their arms. And you are so shameless, so unable to work with the President of the United States, that rather than team up with them to find a new path forward, one that might actually work, you're willing to double down on the same policies that keep killing people, that keep dragging down once great cities like Seattle and San Francisco and Portland and Los Angeles. You guys would rather see our downtowns in complete and utter ruin than work with Donald Trump. You would rather see a dead body in every doorway and alcove and alleyway rather than work with Donald Trump. Absolutely disgusting. Absolutely disgusting and shameful. To have a situation, anything, who among us would continue to do something day in and day out that not only wasn't working, but was having the opposite of the intended impact? And just, well, I'm going to keep doing it. Nobody outside of our government would ever do that. And it's all because of money. It's all because they get so much money. It is so much more expensive to build housing and make that the focus of solving homelessness than to get people into treatment. So if they can say it's a housing issue and get millions and millions and millions of dollars from you that they just push out the door to friends and allies, they don't want to stop that. They'll never solve the homeless crisis if left to their own devices, because then the money goes away. And these organizations that say that they're there to solve homelessness would put themselves out of work and out of business. They're never going to do that. It's like, look, I get it. A lot of people don't like Donald Trump. A lot of people in Seattle and Washington State don't like Donald Trump. But are you really telling me that you're willing to allow people to continue to die because your TDS is so severe? How are you any better than Donald Trump then? You think he's an evil person, he's a mean person, he's a horrible person. You're willing to let people die rather than work with him. What kind of person does that make you? It's stunning. It's stunning. I'm stunned by this political environment that we're in. And immigration is another one, and Republicans aren't perfect in all of this. They could all work together to solve the immigration crisis. No one wants to do it because no one wants the other party to get the credit for doing it. So imagine if Donald Trump comes in and he says, hey, let's work on getting rid of housing first, certainly not making it a priority. Focus on, yes, if we have to, institutionalizing people, scaling up those institutions and getting people into treatment. And oh my gosh, what if we start to make progress under President Donald Trump on homelessness? Democrats on the West Coast cannot have that. They're already looking ahead to 2028. They can't give him anything, any credit, even if it means saving people's lives. It really is truly disgusting. It is truly disgusting, this place that we found ourselves in.